It's fascinating to build AI for healthcare. But one question remains: what actually makes an AI tool a medical device? In today's podcast, we have Dr. Arjun Balaji, a physician executive leading global clinical AI and decision strategies for an MNC in gastroenterology. Previously at Siemens and Philips, where he owned clinical evaluation for 70 plus products across MDD, MDR, and NMPA. Today we are discussing what defines an AI SAMD and where founders go wrong before they even build. I'm Dr. Smita and this is NXT Health. Hello, Dr. Arjun. Good afternoon and thank you so much for joining this podcast on NXT Health.
Thank you, Dr. Smita. It's good to be here and thank you for this wonderful opportunity for me to be part of this, process.
So, for anyone who's listening in a very, very simple English, what exactly is AI medical devices?
There is a concept within the medical device fraternity called software as a medical device. We call it as SAMD. Now, if you have an AI-based software, which is a medical device, then that would be called an AI SAMD. So now what is an AI-based medical device is any medical device that uses AI to diagnose, detect, screen, predict any of these features basically in a patient for a particular type of illness or whatever, then that would be an AI SAMD. To put it simply, if you make a mistake, it can hurt a patient.
True. And if there are some health tech apps that are there, like if there are AI apps that are there, are they different from the AI devices or are they the same, especially in terms of regulations?
The most important thing here would be 2 points that we need to consider. One is the intended use of the app and the clinical risk that is associated by the use of this particular application. Now, this has to be defined. How you define it determines whether the device will be classified as a medical device or a healthcare application. I'll give you a simple example again of an Apple Watch. The Apple Watch counts the steps that you take. It also counts the number of flights of stairs that you walk, and so on. This is done through various technological advancements that they have, which could also be very simple. But at the same time, they also have an application within their watch which identifies atrial fibrillation, basically irregular heart rhythm.
Correct.
So if you look at it, the healthcare app, which helps you count the number of steps, as well as your number of flights of stairs and so on and so forth, is not categorized as a medical device, and that is part of the healthcare application. But Apple required a regulatory clearance from the FDA to put out their atrial fibrillation, feature in their watch, and that will account to be a medical device.
Medical device. Perfect. And if there are some products like Apple Watch where they might have like 60 to 70% functionalities that are health tech related, but specific functionality that may help doctors to diagnose, that time for that functionality, they have to go for approval or for the overall product?
Again, as I said, the most important statement here would be the intended use and the risks associated with what you're going to claim. If you're going to make a claim that, hey, I'm going to use my watch to diagnose atrial fibrillation, which Apple says it does, then you will have to go for a regulatory approval for that particular functionality.
Got it.
Apple need not worry about getting an approval for its step counter or the stair calculator or their sleep calculator and so on and so forth. So they don't have to get any approvals for that.
Got it. Okay. Now it's I think definition wise, we are absolutely clear. Now, if there are some, tech founders and they are planning to build any medical device with the AI integration, where do they have to start? Like, what should be the first step for them? Any product that is there, everybody wants doctors to use it. It should have a regulatory approval. Everybody wants to, of course, make a business, as well as it should give valid justification to patients for using this particular tool if doctors are using, right? So where a tech founder should start, what should be the first step?
See, I think it's a great question. One of the commonest mistakes people do is they try to build a solution and then fit it to a problem. I think that is something which they should not do. Firstly, if I have to speak from any problem setting, a tech founder, as you mentioned, ideally find out what problem they want to solve. Talk to some of the key opinion leaders in that field to find out if that is a need, a real need. Okay. Obviously, the tech founder or somebody who wants to build this particular product does not want to do it, out of goodwill or anything like that. So they would want to get some return on investment. So they have to also identify that this particular KOL group that they are talking to is a little diverse, assuming that they want to decide that I am going to release this product in multiple geographies. So you start doing this first. One, to recap what I just said, identify the problem, talk to the key opinion leaders in that space to understand the unmet need. Now decide what is the intended use of the product that you are going to build. Once you do that, you then define what are the markets you want to release your product in. Once you decide that, hey, I'm going to release the product in the US, India, Europe, Japan, and maybe Canada or whatever, right? Then you understand what are the necessary systems that are required to be put in place. When I say systems, it is not about developers or testers and so on. They are absolutely essential. But you need to have a quality management system that is put in place. You need to have regulatory experts who understand what are the necessary local geographical regulations that are needed. And at the same time, you will also have to understand the requirements around cybersecurity and all of that. So put
Yeah.
some of these systems in place and then start collecting the data that is required for your product. And obviously, how do you develop an AI product? Same way, model development, training, testing, validation, and so on. Then you have to go through documentation, which I think is a very important but often neglected piece of this whole process. The documentation becomes extremely important. Alignment between documents, it's almost like the documents need to communicate with each other. It's almost that is a requirement. And eventually you define your commercialization process and then your launch strategy and then release the product. These are the steps I would say anybody should look at a very high level.
But like when you explain me the process, this is a very standard process of like when we look at the pharma product into the market or a biotech product into the market or the larger devices, that are already there in the market, done by big devices and pharma companies. Now, when a basic startup person, like probably somebody working with some incubation centers or from IITs of India, and these bright AI scientists, they are at a stage where probably they have not seen the regulatory environment, but they want to build some AI which will help doctors to diagnose something. And I see many startups are doing that. Now, these people are good with tech. Okay, and it's a harsh question that I want to ask. Like looking at all the nuances that are associated with this, do you think it is okay for the startup founders, like early stage startup founders, to even look into AI in medical devices, or let it be handled by a big devices company and big pharma, big tech, than actually initial stage companies?
Absolutely not. I would never ever discourage anybody or any startup founder from identifying or wanting to build an AI product to help in terms of diagnosis or detection and things like that. Because you spoke about IITs, I'm assuming that this question is from an Indian context. So the West builds AI because of scarcity of time and resources. Okay, in the name of so-called burnout that these healthcare practitioners face, they want to think about AI from that perspective. This is at a very,
Very
very
true.
high level, I'm saying. In India, we need to build AI because of the scarcity of expertise and the need for reach of this AI into underserved and unmet areas. So if you are developing an application and you follow this due diligence process, more or less, I'm quite certain that we can definitely cater to the needs of the Indian healthcare system. Second, we have definitive examples in India as well. If you look at companies like Qure.ai, their application around the National Tuberculosis Program has been a big success. At the same time, I don't remember the exact name of the company, but there is a product called Chest Eye, which identifies a normal chest X-ray in an autonomous way using AI. So these are all some really, really good products. Chestai is not an Indian company, of course, but these are really, really good products which can support and help us achieve this reach to the underserved areas within India.
Then tell me one thing, like take even example of Qure.ai or other products that we are talking about. Do you think India is a fair market for them? If the cost is higher or if implementation becomes a problem, regulatory takes time, startup or early stage companies will burn out, right? It's not easy to wait for all the approvals for years and years and then get into the market and then see the benefit and return of investment. It takes time. So is India a good market for such kind of a AI medical devices, or we are not yet ready?
I certainly think India is definitely a very, very good market for AI. As I said, in India, the product that we need is an AI product which, should I say, bridges the gap or helps in achieving the need to reduce the scarcity of expertise in underserved areas. Second, I would also say one step further, we should stop apologizing for the fact that the product we need for India is quite different from the product that is required for the West.
True.
And number three, if you look at some of the hospitals in India, we are one of the biggest medical tourism, should I say, countries in the world. People come from across the globe in the name of medical tourism to get treatments done, not just for your medical health, but also dental health as well. And they do come here and get themselves checked. So AI will definitely be beneficial if you're trying to develop a product in India for sure. The last point that I want to make here is you mentioned about the time required for approvals. All this is dependent on the strategy that you have. If you are looking at building a product which is of low risk, then the time required to clear this product into the market is definitely less. If the product or the claims that you are making for your product is of high risk, which would require clinical trials and so on and so forth, then the time obviously that is required to bring the device into the market is longer. Now, we should also take into consideration that this is something which we cannot compromise because the safety of the patient is of paramount importance. So, keeping this in mind, we have to devise a strategy on what our intended use and the claims that we make for our product are going to be, and then decide how we want to bring this out into the market, and also understand the fact that in India, majority of the payment for healthcare is done out of pocket even today, despite various government insurance schemes. How a hospital or a conglomerate of hospitals and so on will decide to purchase your product is a slightly tricky strategy or a tricky, should I say, situation that these companies will have to go through or face in comparison to the West.
Let me take this a step ahead and discuss about this point. Like, assume that somebody in India building some AI driven medical device. India is a market, but then everybody wants to launch their products in the other markets. So what's your take on that? Is it even a good strategy to think about other markets from the beginning?
Absolutely. I think that's what when I said any tech founder they need to decide where they want to think about releasing their product. If they want to restrict it to one geography, then that's a choice they are making. If they want to release it in multiple geographies, then they need to put in the necessary frameworks that are required to be able to release in those other geographies as well.
Okay.
And if you look at Qure.ai again, I'll take the example of Qure.ai. Of course, I followed them quite well, primarily because of my interest in radiology. And so they have released in multiple markets. You look at another Israeli based company called Viz.ai, they have released in multiple markets as well. I'm not talking about big companies like your Johnson and Johnsons and Medtronics and so on and so forth, but I'm just talking in general about a company which started off with one product and then scaled to multiple products.
Specifically for AI in medical devices, specifically for these kind of innovations, apart from India, like I'm again speaking for Indian startup owners, apart from India as a market, what are the other markets that you think that they should explore? Maybe your top three favorite, or easier for the founders to look into those market compared to the other markets.
Again, all of this is decided. I used two important words. One is the intended use and the clinical risks, right? Everything depends on this. And if you have a similar product out there in the market, then surprisingly, the US is probably the easiest to release because they have a concept or a process called 510K with an already established, if you already have an established predicate device in the market, then you can follow this process, which is robust enough, and release first in the US. In Europe, there is a medical device regulation and also the AI Act that has come into place. And yes, Europe also can be considered, but it is quite strict registration with notified bodies, and then understanding the data requirements and so on and so forth also plays a major role in all of this. There are a lot of other geographies which have their own guidances in terms of the requirement of data. I think it's very important to decide what are the requirements of each geography where you want to release your product, and what is it that you're going to gain as return of investment from these geographies, and then make a call whether you want to release in those geographies or not.
Just again, extension to the same discussion is, if there is a global company who has built a device in their market, think about, like, probably they have a CE certificate, probably in the Europe market they have a nice good approvals, they are trying to access India as a market, how difficult it is for them, or what are the things they should consider before accessing India as a geography for their next expansion?
I think the most important thing here, if they are already CE marked or approved in the US or something like that, then it does not change a lot if they want to come to India. They can definitely use some of the evidence that they have generated in these markets as some supporting evidence for the claims that they want to make for the Indian market, if they're going to retain the same claims, that is. And they will have to go through the due process within the medical device regulations which are there in India. Of course, the medical device regulations for AI in India is still maturing, and I think it requires a good amount of maturity. And considering all of this, I would say it's not a bad idea to wanting to release their product in India, but at the same time, they will have to decide, especially around the reimbursement strategies, as to how they are going to get back their investment, and then go through the due diligence. Yeah.
Now I'm speaking on behalf of probably doctors. We are giving a tool, or we are giving some product to doctors to help them to diagnose patients to begin with, and different conditions. Probably tomorrow it will help doctors to treat, probably during surgical interventions. We don't know where it's going to go. Now it's that Uber story, right? Like, if something goes wrong and if driver commits any kind of a problem, then technology is not responsible for the human behavior. Now, here, when we speak about something as sensitive as diagnosing a particular disease, whose responsibility it will be? Like, if a doctor is using it, then is it a AI? I mean, who plays a bigger role? I agree that doctors do need to take a decision, but we also know that AI learns on its own, and AI is much smarter. Of course, I don't understand AI much, but what if doctors are worried that this diagnosis, is it correct or not? How much I can trust the AI? Third thing is how much I can actually rely on it, and it will not give me something which I'm not aware of it. So how that balance doctors needs to think about.
I think this is a very important question which a lot of doctors do ask. Now, I have to answer this in two parts. The first part is, if you look at what the intended use of the device is going to be, we mentioned that majority of the AI applications, they mention that they assist or aid the physician or clinician or the surgeon or the radiologist and so on, right? It's only a tool which aids them in making the right decision.
Yes.
The onus or the responsibility of making the right decision will remain in the hands of the doctor. There is some literature available out there where people have been using AI for some time, and suppose the AI is not available. Let's say I'm using AI to detect some cancer in a CT scan, and I'm using it for 8-10 months, and I am able to, let's for a minute assume that I'm able to read 20% more CT scans in a day than what I was able to do without AI. Now, I've done this for 10 months, 1 year, or 1.5 years. And then all of a sudden, my hospital or the diagnostic center decides not to have this application anymore. Then I have to switch over to standard of care, which is me relying on the knowledge that I have learned in my specialization. So there is a lot of literature out there where they have shown that the performance of some of the doctors in that particular cohort, which is a very small cohort, in some cases had deteriorated because of the absence of AI when they switched over to standard of care. So it's extremely important that this paper, it's in fact stresses on the fact that we need to have regular standard of care based, should I say recertification, like how they do in the US or how they do
Yeah.
it in other countries. You need to have recertification where the doctors have to go through a small exam or something every 5 or 10 years, right? And
Yeah.
that is an expectation that they are having so that they don't get lost in the world of AI and forget the standard of care that they trained themselves, all those years working really hard.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And how's India is preparing for these things, right? In terms of regulations, in terms of educating doctors how to ethically as well as responsibly use AI into their practice, as well as probably educating patients whether to completely rely on AI-driven solutions or not. Where are we in terms of regulations?
I think from a regulation point, as I mentioned a little while ago, we still need a good amount of maturity in terms of AI based medical device regulations. I mean, even if you look at it from a global point of view, a lot of countries have guidance documents. They don't have an AI regulation available. And then in Europe, you have the AI Act. US, they have a concept called PCCP. It's called Change Control Program, basically, predetermined change control program. You spoke about the AI model learning continuously and so on. So you decide what could you, as a medical device manufacturer, decide what your next model or the model after that is going to do, right? How it is going to evolve. If I have to use that word, how the models are going to evolve. You declare this upfront, and then you get a permission, and then you go on to build. Otherwise, you will have to go through the entire product development process from scratch, right? So I would say certain countries have certain options available on how these devices get developed. And India, I think we need a little bit more maturity in this area for sure.
Yes, it's not there in my research. I was not able to see any guidance or regulations that are happening in this space compared to how much of the AI is been built everywhere, like all the startups. And back to say, but then if you have some AI in your startup, it's very easy to get investment. Okay, people like AI enabled, AI enhanced works that are happening. That's interesting. I have a last question, and it's regarding traditional pharma biotech way of regulatory approval or getting the product into the market versus with AI. Now, when we speak about pure play medical devices or even intervention products, we know that these are direct human intervention. If we are talking about anesthesia machine, we are actually using and doing human intervention over here. But AI is just supportive. It's not, I don't have to give any injectables or I don't have to use the device to monitor even. Now, when it is about traditional, we know that we have to get every country specific regulatory approvals. But if it is AI, if it is a supporting device, why do we have to think about country specific regulatory approval? Why it is not easier when we are not going into the intervention?
It's a fair question, but at the same time, because there is a lot of unknown when it comes to AI, to start off, countries expect the application or the device to be tested on their population. And because in this case, let's put it this way, rather than you calling it an anesthesia machine, I would say, let's take the example of a ECG monitor, right? If you take an example of an ECG monitor, it is tested on patients to look at the electrical activity of the heart. And this is tested on X number of patients. It has gone through a rigorous regulatory approval itself. When it comes to AI, what is AI doing? AI is probably helping the doctor interpret the ECG. It is saying, hey, look, this is just an example. Hey, look, there could be a ST wave segment elevation, which means the patient is having a myocardial infarction. Or there could be a wide PR interval. This is something which the AI can probably do. And keeping this in mind, if the doctor relies completely on the AI, then the doctor is going to make the diagnosis with the support of this AI application. As I answered in the first question, you make a mistake, you're going to hurt the patient. So it's extremely important that this application is of equal risk, if not lesser or more, compared to traditional medical devices. Number one. Number two, why you need to look at this in specific populations. As I said, certain countries expect the model to be tested in their population. It could be because of ethnicity, race, or the way certain diseases present in certain population and so on. Keeping these things in mind, they would expect the model to be tested in their particular population or their set of people. And that's when they want to give an approval for the release of this product.
If anyone listening to our podcast and they are currently building any medical device which is enhanced by AI or powered by AI, what's your message to them?
Please follow the due diligence process. Don't build a solution and then search for a product, or rather, don't build a solution and then search for a problem. So follow the due diligence, develop an application by talking to different KOLs, by identifying the right unmet need, and then build a solution. I'm 100% sure it will be used in the healthcare setting, and we definitely need a lot of AI moving forward, for sure.
Okay, I guess I wanted to keep it short to understand, at least create the conversation on this topic that I don't think anybody is speaking currently. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Arjun. And I think we have covered at a very, very top level and a very simplified way. And you explained it so simply for a doctor like me. I'm not from the IT background. So thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you so much.
If you liked our podcast, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who's passionate about building something in healthcare. This is NXT Health, and I'm Dr. Smita.